somewhere today, I had an email from him, I thought, about all these talking points. Did you not? Did
Oh, I
you?
forwarded it to you. Oh, hey, by the way, we're live. Hello, lunatics. Good evening. Um, we're going to do our best to hurt as many feelings as possible tonight. We actually got an expert to join us tonight to talk about insurance.
For a
So,
change,
for a
we're going to have
change,
an
yeah.
expert tonight. So
Somebody on this show is going to actually know what the hell they're talking about. Um,
that'll be a first.
we'll take a minute here to do some review. We talked about this last week. We'll give you another little teaser. Larry and I spent the weekend in Hurricane sequestered over New Year's weekend, and we rewrote the entire Blue Ribbon program. We're calling it Masterclass 2023. You can read about it on our website. It's right there on the front page. But we're going to do an episode about it and kind of break it down here in a couple of weeks. Yet to be determined when we're going to do that, but we're going to do it. I was trying to think, was there any housekeeping we need to do from last week? I know we're going to talk about leash versus authority tonight because our guest has really interesting insights into that. So we stirred up a big hornet's nest about that last week, as we do most every week.
I am on the road. In case you don't
Oh, yeah.
recognize my surroundings, I'm in an undisclosed location in Indianapolis, Indiana, because I have to attend the mandatory 3-year lease renewal meeting tomorrow, and so I came up here to get ready for that and
Y'all,
do the podcast tonight. So I've
y'all
got to
have
sign a 62-page document tomorrow, and unlike most people that do it, I'm going to read every word right there in front of them, and I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to make it as miserable for them as I possibly can make it, because
y-
I'm not going to be a hypocrite and criticize you guys for not reading it and me do the same thing. Even though I have read it, this is the third one I've signed. You do one every 3 years, so um, maybe the fourth one I've signed. But anyway, I'm gonna go through. We're gonna read every word of it,
y'all
and
have no idea how much I wish I could be in Indianapolis tomorrow to watch this because
I'm
you
sure you'll hear
know
about it.
there's I'm listen. I'm anxiously awaiting your report, but if I could, because I went to an orientation with one of the drivers. I don't know 6 months ago, and it was a pretty it was an experience. Let's just say that.
All right.
And so now this is the cabs class, continued awareness of business and safety. And Larry's got to go. And God, I wish I could be in that room because I just know there's going to be some BCO in there that's going to say something stupid. And, I mean, there could be some Larry Long specials handed out tomorrow. I mean,
Could
that's a
be.
real possibility. Um, God, I
It's
wish I
it's
could be there.
it's very possible. So, well, anyway, we'll see what happens. I don't even know. Have I met the guy who teaches this class in Indianapolis?
I don't think so. But well, the guy that was doing it, I think, is the guy we met at the truck show that came to our
Yeah,
dinner. But I
yeah.
think he
But
left and
he's
went to
not
another
there
company.
anymore. Yeah, yeah.
So no, I don't think we've met this guy before. So, well, he's
Yeah.
fixing to
He's in for a surprise, isn't he?
he's fixing to have a trip.
So I
Yeah.
have a question about this. Of
Uh
course,
huh.
I've been to 189 in orientations there over the years with drivers,
Uh huh.
and so they're not going to have this in the same room as that. Obviously, where do they have
No,
this thing?
no. So it's down. It's like down the hall toward Al's office. Like you were gonna, not where you're gonna walk around to get to the front where Brenda is. You're gonna
Yeah,
go to the pop machine and turn right, and it's back there toward Al's office. So
really.
I guess it's
Well,
a dungeon or
is it in
storage
Steve?
closet or something they cleaned out.
Is it in Steve's
Yeah.
old office in the corner?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't.
Hmm.
I don't remember where Steve's off, but it's like right
Re-
across the hall from Al.
Okay.
So
Oh,
it's
across the
it's
hall from now. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So they must have cleaned out like a storage, like a janitor's closet or something, to do cabs in. So I don't know, but I'm anxiously waiting your report. We should have just a special podcast segment next week for Larry's experience in cabs class. Cause
Listen, there may be things come from down on high, Now, I have to practice up on my genuflecting and curtsying if I've got to walk by Alexander's office tomorrow, right?
easy. Uh, I listen. I mean, I can't wait. I just can't wait. Of course, now you don't get to go to Cracker Barrel like you used to. I think they bring in some kind of cheap pizza.
They took us out to Golden Corral every other time I've
Oh,
been
that's what
there.
I meant. That's what I meant. Golden Corral.
Yeah,
I was thinking,
yeah.
Okay.
So they bring lunch in now. Okay. Well, so I have a question for you. Is it start
Yes,
at
go ahead.
7:30 or is it 8? Do you know?
That I don't know. I'd probably be there at 7:30. That's what I would probably do.
Oh,
Didn't you get an email? I'm sure.
probably. I'm sure I did. I'll look at it.
I mean,
I thought maybe you had coached up Andrew last week because I know he was just there, and you could answer my
that's
question
right.
without me having to do that. So,
well, that's right.
text Andrew and ask him what time he showed up. So,
all right, let's get the show on the road. So, I made a TikTok a couple weeks ago after my experience in Ohio Scale House, where I found out that I had a trailer light that was not operating properly, and I had done my pre-trip, drove about 20 miles to that scale. He pulls me around. We go through all the paper. Everything's good until we got to that part, and he's like, "Well, your turn signal's not working." So I went and I looked, and I'm like, "Well, I want to know, is it the bulb? Is it the circuit?" And I asked him if the midship turn signal was flashing, and his response was, and I quote, "What?
what?
Swear to God,
Midship.
hand on the Bible." That's exactly what he said.
You're driving a boat?
Right. So, and of course it wasn't. And I'm like, I've seen this before. So I go up to the front of the trailer. I unplugged the pigtail. I pulled the little pins apart, plugged it back in. It was working. I said, "Hey, see, it's working." He's like, "Great." So he gives me a warning. And he's like, "Well, I look here, I circled it, that I verified it was working." "Okay, buddy, whatever." So I leave. Well, then I get a letter, and I've got, 72 points and $50 fine, a civil citation from the state of Ohio. So I was a little salty. So I made a TikTok about it, and I called it the biggest scam in the history of trucking industry. And basically what I mean by that is, number one, most drivers don't understand.
You got there's a lot of competition for that title, okay?
There is. There 100% is. But I don't like the way it's set up, that a cop who probably just out of lack of understanding or ignorance doesn't understand that giving you a warning is not helping you. You're better off with a citation, because a citation you can fight in court, a warning you can't.
Now, didn't this happen in Ohio?
This did happen in Ohio.
And didn't you have a friend one time that told you how Ohio DOT cops were assigned that job?
He did. He 100%.
And does that make you want to change that statement you just made before this?
Well, listen. I'm being diplomatic. Okay, I'm being diplomatic.
You.
So anyway,
by the way, we switch roles for this podcast. Okay, normally I'm the diplomatic one, and he's the one that is not. But for some reason, we take on each other's persona on the podcast.
Well,
I'm the one that's a jerk, and he's the one that's.
But we also have we actually have a real guest who's actually an expert in stuff, and so I'm trying to clean up my act a little bit. So anyway, I make this TikTok, and it didn't really go viral. It's like 500,000 now, but I got a notification. And so when you go into your little activities, you can see if someone commented or mentioned your video. And I see one. Now, sometimes you click on that, you don't know what you're going to see. And it was a guy named Brian, and he wasn't a troll, and he had some interesting comments. And I'm like, "Hey, you want to be on the podcast?" And he was like, "Sure." So we're going to bring him on, but his name is Brian Dale. He's got over 20 years of experience in transportation and logistics. He's had his own trucking company and agency. So he's been around. He's appointed with all the major truck insurance markets. He knows what he's talking about. We've had some talks with him. So we're going to bring him on. And I lost my mouse. Let me push a couple of buttons here. Let me push that one and then that one. And
before you push that, remind everybody that we're sponsored by Pittsburgh Power, okay?
Yeah, we are
they're the ones that pay the bill for us doing this for you every Sunday night. So we would appreciate you patronizing them. Also, keep in mind the Blue Ribbon, we're stocking distributors of the OPS products and the max mileage. And now we can welcome our guest.
All right. So without further ado, here's our guest, Brian Dale. Brian, thank you for being here.
Hey guys, thank you for having me.
So,
Welcome.
After we talked to you the other day, I realized, that your experience in insurance and trucking gives us a much greater opportunity to talk about stuff other than CSA. We're going to talk about that because it's an important part of this discussion. But I think what we should do is kind of set the groundwork and let's get everybody speaking the same language and with the vocabulary as far as what these types of insurance are, because a lot of people really don't know. I certainly didn't until I got into it, and now I kind of understand. But you even helped me, break down further and understand. So first, let's talk about the basic types. What are there 5 or 6 basic types of insurance that are required to operate a truck, regardless of if you're leased or authority? You need to have these kinds of insurance. So let's talk about what they are and set that groundwork.
Okay, so I again, thanks for having me on. I've been following your growing podcast and watching your TikToks, and love the content, love what you guys do, and I love trucking. I've been in trucking for like all of my adult life, so anything and everything about trucking, it just piques my interest. And thanks for mentioning the TikTok too. Like, we just started that page not very long ago. So I have, so I've been looking for content and things to discuss. So I really appreciate you guys allowing me to be on here for that reason too. So to break it down, if you're an owner operator, you guys are very well aware, the owner operator has to have his occupational accident coverage or workers' comp, one of the two, and carry that for himself. Because when you're an owner operator, or if you own trucks and hire drivers, you are a business. You're a business. You're not just some guy, slinging trucks or putting things together, or you're not an owner operator / driver and you think you work for the man anymore. You own and run your business. Therefore, You're required to all of the subjectivities of what a business must have with regards to insurance as well. So when you're an owner operator, you need that occupational accident, or I think Larry Landstar calls it what a CPP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Contractor protection.
Right. And so, and we'll get into this too, but you need bobtail or non-trucking or unladen liability, one of those three, to cover you in a case of an accident for bodily injury and property damage to others while you're either not under dispatch and not pulling a trailer. That would be bobtail only, or non-trucking liability, which would mean while you're not under dispatch and you may or may not have a trailer, or unladen liability, which just means you're not under Actually, I think it means you're just not under a load at that point. Mm-hmm. So either work comp or occupational accident or CPP, and you need bobtail insurance. We just call all three of those bobtail. Then you need the insurance for your truck and your trailer if you have one of those too, because normally the fleet that you're going to be leased onto is not going to pick that up. So you've got to insure your own in that case.
And that's the physical damage comprehensive coverage.
Right. Physical damage, comprehensive, collision, however you want to word that. We call it physical damage,
Okay. And then the big one is cargo liability, right?
Well, so if you're going to be a motor carrier under your own authority, you're going to have a different set, different insurance. So now, and thanks to trucking being so heavily regulated, the government is literally in your insurance policy. So if you're an interstate commercial carrier crossing state lines, you have to have a federal authority. And when you're granted that federal authority, it means that the insurance company is required to make a filing with the FMCSA that basically states we have this motor carrier covered to protect the public at all times. Mm-hmm. So that policy is going to pick up liability accidents. This is primary liability I'm talking about right now. Mm-hmm. This is the motor carrier's primary liability. And these prices range from $5,000 to $20,000 a year, sometimes even north of that if you've got some issues per truck. So there is a form MCS 90 in that policy that says that they're making the filing and that they're going to protect the public from any and all claims. So even if you don't have a truck scheduled on the policy, the insurance company is still liable, which is why they're so strict on motor carriers about, either scheduling their trucks if there's, under 20 or 30 trucks and they've got a scheduled truck policy. When you get up bigger than that, they'll write the policy on a symbol called any auto, and they'll report mileage or revenue. So again, we're talking about primary liability and the insurance company being on the hook to the public and governed by the FMCSA. So motor carriers these days can't just take a truck off their insurance policy because they put it up for sale. And the reason for that is because insurance companies have had to pay claims where somebody came by to test drive it, or they bought it and didn't get their own insurance. So technically, it wasn't re-registered in the new owner's name. So there's all kinds of situations where the insurance companies can have to pay large claims, as you can tell. So,
so to restate what you just said, Brian.
Mhm.
So as a owner operator leased to a carrier, you have to have the workers' comp on yourself or some type of coverage that's equivalent to that your state will accept. Number two, you have to have bobtail or some type of unladen or non-trucking liability. And then you have to have physical damage to cover collision and so forth on your property that you own. When you become a carrier, and let's just make sure everybody understands the verbiage here. When you get your own authority, you become a motor carrier. That's what an MC number is that you get with your authority. So in that scenario, you have to add on the primary liability that you just described, correct?
Right. You can also, if you transfer from being an owner operator to getting your own authority, you can let go of the bobtail and unladen and
Right.
non-truck liability policy.
Unless you lease drivers on, correct?
Unless you lease drivers on, and then they each need to have their own, or you can do a company sponsored plan.
Right. Okay.
So if you are going to be a motor carrier and get your own authority, you're going to need that primary liability that I just talked about. Okay. You're going to need cargo insurance for whatever you're hauling, the 100,000 limit, 250, 500, $1 million, depending on what you're hauling. And then you've got to cover your own trucks as well. And if you're hiring drivers, you need workers' comp insurance as well. And then there's other types of business insurance that you might need, such as EPLI for discrimination lawsuits or, bad hiring practices or, things like that.
HR related coverage.
HR related coverages. Yeah. And there's a whole slew of insurance that you would want to look into anytime you're running a business. But there's 5 or other 10 types of policies we could talk about and get into, but
I have a question on that one. So, just in the last couple of days, one of my favorite YouTubers, Gentry and Sons Trucking, out of Tennessee, they had a fire in their shop, and basically it took out like 6 trucks, all their tools.
Oh my gosh.
Burned up a couple of trucks and like his brothers. I mean, it just wiped them out. I mean, it was devastating. And so, obviously people have done a GoFundMe and I've seen arguments in comment section. What's what insurance is for? Okay. Well, this is a great opportunity. So everybody knows if you're trucking, you've got to have insurance for your truck, but what about when your shop burns down and all your tools? And he had just bought like 6 new engines and I mean, just devastating to your business. So you've got to think about those kinds of insurances as well if you're going to run a business, because if you have a shop and all these tools and all these other things that you have to run that trucking business and that burns to the ground, you got to have that too, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Property insurance, and make sure the contents within that property are properly insured, and your tools and all that good stuff too. So yeah.
And if you're open to the public, you got to make sure you got general liability that will cover them if they get hurt on your property.
That's exactly right. There are also situations that, trucking companies could need general liability for other than just on their premises as well. And I guess I could give a few examples, but I'll just give one. But let's say one of your employee drivers is out on the road and is delivering a load and gets into an altercation with someone, and your company gets sued. So it could provide defense for that. So yeah, there's a lot to think about when we're in the business.
At one point in time, we considered hiring a mechanic, and a mobile mechanic, to service our trucks, and then allow him to service other people's trucks if we didn't need him, to keep his income up. When I looked at the coverage for him, it quickly changed my mind to do that business. Okay, because you've got this guy on the side of the road, with cars going by, and he's working in it became very apparent to me that the coverage was going to cost way more than the profit was going to be. And so we unplugged from that idea right away. But it was interesting to me how complicated the coverage was going to have to be for that particular type of operation, a mobile mechanic,
Yeah, and just answering those questions. I mean, I did it for a client the other day. It's like, no, they're not repainting cars. Don't you guys know what we're asking here? It's so funny because I've kind of been on the insurance company side too, in a part of my career. So I'm a good mediator or bridge is to understand what they're asking for and what the answer on applications to satisfy what they need. But
Sure.
Yeah, so if a mobile mechanic were to not tighten the lug nuts, for example, that truck drives off and has a wreck and hurts somebody really bad or kills somebody or whatever, guess he's on the hook.
Yeah. Unless you're TA Petro, and then
shots fired.
I just picked a scab there, Brian. You wouldn't probably understand what that's about.
So I have a couple of questions about physical damage, because Larry wanted to bring up the topic of stated value insurance. All of our trucks are a low enough value that our physical damage insurance doesn't cost very much. But we have had 4 trucks lost, so we've been through the process. But we were talking about, is it standard that it's so much per dollar of value of the truck? Because I think a lot of people will be like, well, sure, I can afford a $3,000 payment. Well, what about that $800 insurance that comes with it? We're so used to we drive an old truck and we got $170 a month or $150 or whatever insurance, physical damage insurance payment, and then we're going to go buy that big shiny W-9, and all of a sudden we're paying almost $1,000. So, how is physical damage priced, and how do you protect yourself to make sure that you're actually covered for the amount of the loss? Given that we've had people buying $250,000 trucks that probably aren't worth $150 now.
Yeah, and that's something that happened in the industry. When the demand for trucking, the freight rates went up, the demand for trucks and trailers went. They were almost non-existent. Trying to find a truck or trailer at affordable price, it raised all of the prices through the roof, right? And so now, as everything has come crashing back down, those values are not what they they're not what they were. So you need to evaluate that once a year, and keep in mind. I want to, and I'm glad you mentioned this. Stated value insurance is not agreed value insurance. You and the insurance company did not agree that is the value of the truck. Until
there's a claim. Then you get to until there's a claim. Then you get to agree on it.
Then you agree. So let me explain. There's actual cash value as a method for determining the value of a piece of equipment in the event of a total loss. Okay. Actual cash value is if the adjuster goes on truck paper and finds 3 lunatic trucks with 800,000 miles on them, and they're all worth $40,000 a piece. It's pretty safe to say that's the market value. Right. That's the same method you want to use when you come up with that value for your equipment. Okay. You want to try to find some comps online and see what everything's kind of going for. So So actual cash value, I think everybody knows pretty much what that means. I think we've all heard that at some point of our life. That's pretty much market value. That's what you could get for it if you turn it into cash. Stated value is almost, how do I word this? We'll just say that the insurance company pays the lesser of the two when it comes to stated value. So you're going to pay your insurance premium based on, and let's say that you guys used a value of 35,000 because you didn't look at comps, for example. We'll just use an example, right? So you state that the value is 35,000. Well, the insurance policy is most likely going to say we'll pay you ACV or stated value, whichever is less. Yes. So in trucking, you don't see insurance company offering agreed value. That's more like with your collector cars like Haggerty and whatnot, when something's really, they need to come out and get an appraisal done and say, if the thing burns to the ground, we'll give you $200,000 for your collector car,
Right. Yeah.
So they don't really have agreed value in trucking.
But the point I think that needs to be made here, Brian, is that regardless of what you think it's worth, and regardless of what value you put on it, and you pay the premium based on that value that you stated, the actual value is not going to be determined until there is a claim, and then your perception of value does not take place. It's like you say, it's all determined by an adjuster. There may be a little negotiation. I was able to negotiate a few things because I could provide, for example, a receipt where I just overhauled an engine in the past few months. And so I got credit for the fact that raised the value. Not easy to do, but can be done. But here's the other thing I want to make sure that you make, okay? The premium that you pay is not discounted or refunded because the actual value is less than what you stated it was, and there's a claim. That extra premium is forfeited to the insurance company.
That is correct.
I think there's a lot of guys that don't understand this. Okay, they think that if I insure this truck for $100,000 and I'm paying the premium $100,000, when it gets totaled, I'm going to get $100,000, and there's nothing about that that's even close to being true.
Right. So you need to reevaluate that each year at policy renewal. Some insurance companies will allow you to adjust if you've realized during the middle of your policy, hey, my valuation is incorrect on this.
Or you add something to raise the value. With the guys at Landstar, Gallagher requires an email, and they'll change the stated value with an email, and they'll send you a new valuation. What if you had an APU, or what if you do this? What if you do that? We might change the value. But the point I wanted to be sure and make though is that you're choosing to insure it for a value more than what it really is. Doesn't buy you anything except your own peace of mind that you think until it comes to the point where you have to have a claim.
That's correct.
So you owe yourself the obligation, and here's where it gets to be bad. You for whatever reason you fall in love with a truck. You walk by it and you get aroused, and you have to have that truck, and you pay whatever you have to pay to get it. In your mind, that truck is worth that. But to everybody else in the trucking world, that truck is worth this. And if you decide to pay based on how much love you have for this thing, it is just going to disappoint you. And what happens now, Brian, when truck values have decreased so much in the past 6 months that they're underwater. They're way underwater. What happens then?
Well, if you have a loan, you may be entitled to purchase gap coverage. You'd have to check with your insurance company about that. I'm sure Landstar offers that through Gallagher. But if if you've paid out of pocket, I mean, like you said, the value of it's going to be determined at the time of the loss. So if you're upside down, and you weren't able to buy gap coverage and have a loan on this truck, then you're going to be upset if there's a total loss on it. And
Absolutely.
I hope there's not so many people out there that are upside down in their equipment because of the freight boom that occurred. But there are.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and my favorite scab to pick are these lease purchase guys. You know, they're paying so much more to get that truck that there's no way that even if they wrecked it on day one, there's no way the coverage is going to pay what that lease is. You know, that's the problem, is that when you play double and triple for a truck, how do you insure that?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, you're taking business risks in everything you do in business, and I highly encourage. Not all lease purchase programs are bad. Having fleets as insurance clients, I've seen some good ones, I've seen some bad ones, but if people are in those, I highly recommend that they pull them back out and look at them and review them and make sure they know what they're in for, because there
Well,
are.
that was the
wait.
point. That was the point
Wait.
I wanted to make about the state of value, is that, I know there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation and just a lot of plain old ignorance about this. And we've encountered it several times because, like you said, we've had 4 losses. I'm in usually the opposite situation. We pay cash for trucks and we add value to the trucks. I'm in the position of having to prove to the adjuster that the things I've done to the truck have added this value, and you have to, they'll allow some of it they don't even understand the value that we've done to it. So it's kind of a struggle for us sometimes. And here's where we get into it. Let's say we go out and pay $20,000 for a truck. We put another 20 in to get it on the road, reliable, safe, making good fuel and everything. And so we got 40 grand in the truck. There's no way that truck is going to be insurable for that. So for the first 6 months or whatever, until you can make enough profit on the truck to where you can get your investment down to where it's insurable, you're kind of at risk in our situation, in our lunatic model. And we don't hide from that. We point it out. But fortunately,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
what I would recommend, obviously, you already know, keep up with your receipts and the dates of, when these restorations or, repair bills are done matter a lot. So 6 months is going to, count more than some repair work you did a year ago. But, if you're having a disagreement with an insurance company adjuster over the value of a vehicle, and you can show, if you can find some comps, that's great. But if you're having trouble with that too, most insurance policies do have a clause in there that will allow you to hire an outside adjuster, independent third-party adjuster at your own expense. And I mean, you're looking at like what, $300-500, and it could be worth it,
Exactly. Now, sometimes that plays against you. We had a truck that, matter of fact, he's watching right now. We had a truck that was totaled. And Chris, you might tell with the numbers here, but it was valued at like $30,000. Am I right about that?
The best thing that I've ever seen happen with an adjuster is make sure when he shows up, it's raining and there's snow on the ground, and he looks up and down both sides and goes, 20,000 hidden damage. Okay,
exactly.
Because I put a hood and bumper on it and started hauling freight with it.
We got a check for 30 grand. Okay, we probably spent about 10. And it was back on the road again. We bought it as salvage. Okay, it totaled. We bought it as salvage, and then we probably put $10,000 in, and it went back to hauling freight. So,
and if you're, if you're in this, it kind of follows you guys too, but it definitely follows you if you're under your own authority. Your claims follow you, and so when you get to where you're trending above a 50% or 60% loss ratio, and what that is premium dollars paid out versus premium dollars spent. Now you're kind of, you're kind of taking your own risks now, because you're looking at price increases on your insurance premiums too.
Sure. Now I will say this. I will say this about that. I've been at Landstar now for 10 years, and when I've always used Landstar's agency, Gallagher, but I've had 4 losses. I've had 4 totals, and we've had drivers that have been fired by Landstar because of too many tickets or too many accidents or things like that. Never has the premium ever changed. Is that just because the contract with Landstar and there's so much business that they give them besides the home office, putting them in there, in there with them? I mean, are they just have the volume that they don't have to to rate each truck or each incident or each driver?
So what that is it's because, Gallagher has Landstar on a master fleet policy. So
Right.
you guys are not really judged on your individual basis, most likely.
Correct. We're not. We're not.
Yeah. So most likely you're on a master fleet policy. So when that big, huge policy comes up for renewal, the insurance companies, they're looking at all the claims combined. So
Right.
I guess if you guys were, burning up a couple of trucks a year, Landstar would be like, hey, you guys need to make some changes in your risk management program. What's going on?
Right.
Well,
Right.
something that of the many, many lessons that Larry has taught me in negotiation of not taking the first offer, and I think just most people in general are not accustomed of how to negotiate. They get an offer and they're like, oh, that's all they're giving me. And I'm like, no. You argue and you go back and forth and you fight because we see it all the time. Somebody will come to us and, oh, well, we had this problem. We couldn't find the part. And I'm like, I'll find it. Give me an internet connection in 20 minutes and I'll find that national back-ordered part and I'll have it on the way, because I refuse to take that first, so it's much bigger than insurance. But, if you're going to be in business, you're going to be in the big leagues, then you're going to have to behave as a business person does. And somebody hands you an offer and no, let's go back and forth. But I think just most people just they don't have the capacity or the patience to really, go back and forth with that adjuster or find that third party like you were talking about. And it's, it can be intimidating and scary, but you've got to protect yourself. And sometimes you got to fight, and maybe you got to get Mr. $400 an hour involved, to write some letters and threaten some people, But I was so, he wore my ass out the first 6 months I was here, because I would, I wasn't reading every line of an invoice and making sure that, and now I'm a master. I can get an invoice down, every single time. What are you charging me this for?
I've created a monster, Brian.
Oh boy.
100%.
That's good. That's one thing about, being an insurance broker is, and I mean, even looking at these insurance company policies, I mean, we have to know what we're selling our client. I mean, we have insurance to protect too,
Sure.
and I mean, you would be surprised at some of these cargo policies, for example, that are out there that, exclude some of the things that the motor carrier hauls.
Right.
And you come across that and you're like, wait, what? Why are you even quoting this? So
Right.
yeah.
That brings up a question. I've only seen this maybe 5 times in all the loads that we've hauled, but I've had an agent say, or I'll find a line added on the freight bill that's like $150 for extra insurance. So I'm deducing from that Landstar's got a basic coverage, but this load requires more than that. So that's something I have access to at Landstar. If I had my own authority and I come up on a really good paying load, but my insurance doesn't have what the broker or the customer wants, do you have those supplemental types available to you as an independent to go say, hey, I need another 50 or 100,000 or whatever it is?
Yeah. So being an independent, I mean, we're just like Gallagher, honestly. I mean, it's hard to see that from inside Landstar's, where you guys are leased on, but, Gallagher is an independent broker too. So, they handle the fleet insurance for Landstar and then their owner operator programs. And, I have some fleets that none of which are quite that big, some maybe at our agency, but, so we manage these policies for our fleets. And, a fleet may have a policy that's only $100,000 in limit. And they could be calling my team twice a week. Hey, we need a 250 limit for this. We need a 500,000 limit for this. And over time, we might look at it and say, look, it's really adding up. Why don't you guys just get the policy limits increased to 250 or 500?
Right.
Or, if a trucking company is hauling load board freight, and it's $100,000 9 times out of 10. they may keep that $100,000 cargo policy, but
Right.
then let's say they have a customer like a retail store or some dedicated contract that's 10% of their gross revenue, and that contract requires a higher limit. Then you can have a specified shipper endorsement on that cargo policy.
Gotcha.
All of
So you've got a
that.
high value customer, and all of his loads exceed that, but the bulk of the business is still not enough to justify going to that higher level policy for everybody.
all the way,
So you
all
got
the way
specific-
across the board.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then some insurance companies are real flexible, and they say, well, how often 100,000 is what we've quoted here. How often do they haul something that goes up to 250? And you say, well, they only
Right.
did it 5 times a year last year. Okay,
Right.
we'll throw it in for cheap. If the exposure changes, we trust you to let us know. Yeah.
You mentioned we didn't talk about this at the top, but you're an insurance broker, and I think I can describe that. But I want you to help me out here. You're not exclusive to any one insurance company. You have a customer base, and you go find them the best deal for them from a selection of insurance companies that you can choose that are best for that situation. Would that description be correct?
Right. Exactly. And I'm very fortunate and blessed to be with Commercial Insurance Associates. We're a pretty large firm, and they allow me to run my business underneath our business, so we pretty much have a team. We call ourselves the National Transportation Practice arm of CIA. I'm a secret agent at the CIA.
I was going to say, I don't know if I use the CIA part of it, but
Yeah, I got to be careful when I'm joking about that. But
somebody will be
yeah,
wanting to talk about President Kennedy with you. So,
so we have direct contract relationships with most of your top tier insurance companies, and then we use some like wholesale brokers, or what they call managing general agents as well. So we've got have a very tight grasp on the marketplace with regards to insurance company selection. And, if a fleet grows to 50, 100, 200 power units, we also have the method and the means to allow them to take more and more risks. So higher and higher deductibles to where they actually stair step into a captive situation. That sounds bad. Nobody's being held captive, but
no, I get it.
it's
So you can you walk them through the process of self-insuring and then reinsuring that for them?
Yes, we can do that, and we have done that. So a captive you have your captive administrator. They get an insurance company to back this program, and they're very selective about who they work with. And 20 to 100, or maybe even 200 or 300 fleets will come together and all be insured under this captive program.
Right.
Big name insurance companies backing the whole thing, but the trucking companies are taking $100,000 to $500,000 worth of risk. Yeah. And they also become a part of the insurance company at that point. And
Exactly.
I've heard so many people out there just think, oh, I can just self-insure. I can self-insure. I promise you probably can't. Like FedEx and Landstar can, and some of these really mega fleets, the FMCSA only gives maybe 1 or 2 of those statuses out a year, from what I've heard. So,
well, and you've got to jump through a lot of hoops. People complain about Landstar's compliance, but that's the reason. Landstar has a thing here called a sitting duck policy, and a Landstar operator is prohibited from parking on ramps and off ramps or anywhere within 14 feet of a public highway. And you, as an insurance guy, the reason for that because of a nuclear verdict. Regardless of why you're sitting there, you're at fault if somebody hits you. Period. So that's part of their ability to reinsure is all the compliance that they require us to participate in, and that being one of them. Of course, all the other compliance stuff, like what I'm going to do tomorrow, half what I do tomorrow is going to be taking this, sitting through more safety films. But again, when you're a defendant in court and you can say, well, here's what we do here. Here's this whole litany of things that we do to make us safer. It makes it harder and harder for a defense attorney to find holes in your plan, in your program.
Exactly. And I need to go ahead and say that, I don't know everything about Landstar. I don't represent them or know much about them or their agent. And I'm surely not speaking on behalf of, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that. I'm no part of that. I'm just an independent broker. So that probably it would be good for a segue into the next topic, if you guys will. Why is Landstar so picky about their compliance and their rules so strict? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, and I'll tell you my opinion of the biggest scam in the trucking insurance or trucking history, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I believe the biggest scam ever to hit the trucking industry is the billboard attorney.
The hammer.
You got it.
The hammer, the ambulance chaser. Well, forever and ever it was the tobacco companies, and that went away. Somebody had to fill that void, Brian. And listen, truck drivers are pretty easy targets. Okay, you ever met one of them?
Trucking is so difficult. There's so many regulations, and attorneys will turn that around and say, the regulations are just the minimum, and they'll use the Reptile Theory. Look it up. It triggers.
Oh yeah.
You've heard of this. Okay. So
yes.
They paint us in such a bad light, and they say, they can't even maintain their standard minimum compliance from the DOT. Well, it's just like you said, you can have a tail light working 20 minutes down the road and it's not working by the time you get to the scale.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But they twist on these things and they set new precedences. Plaintiffs, attorneys in trucking, we'll call them ambulance chasers for the fun of it. They literally hold conferences across the United States and share case data with each other. They are out for the money. But here's the thing. I don't have any statistics behind this. But in most cases, I can tell you that if someone has been injured or their vehicle's been, in an accident with a big truck, in most cases, the insurance companies want to be fair with you. They want to be fair. They will do whatever it takes to make you happy. And these billboard attorneys go, promote themselves. They get involved in this claim. And they raise the stakes by giving you litigation financing. They try to do all these things to make you cozy when all they're really doing is trying to increase the verdict or the settlement so that they can make some money on the deal.
Absolutely.
Yep. 100%.
And listen, prior to December of 2019, when we had paper logbooks, it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how easy it would be to take somebody's logbook and look back and find one incident where you should not have been on the road?
Well, and that's where they're even getting money when sometimes when the trucking company is not at fault. So a lot of, and they'll attack. So they attack the trucking company, they subpoena all the files and find. So when you make these policies and procedures as a motor carrier, as a trucking company, you've got to make them to where you can follow them. You can't make them strict and then not follow them. You have to make them where, it's part of your company. You can't use somebody else's, policies and procedures when you decide to do this. So there's so much to know. There's so much compliance. I mean, there's even certain times when you need to delete the data, and it's like if you're going to use the inward facing dash cams, you've got to use it for driver coaching. And the ones that won't comply, you got to get them out of there. But all of this is like kind of from the courtroom backwards is why it is why everything is so tough. And that's why CSA sucks as much as it does, especially when you've got an unruly officer or one that doesn't know what he's talking about, or you feel like he doesn't know what he's talking about. And why Landstar and so many other trucking companies are so careful and so stringent on these things. It all comes down to,
Yeah,
complying.
and a lot of individual drivers feel like the trucking companies don't have their back. That the deck stacked against them all the time. Because look, you can make a couple mistakes and lose your job in trucking pretty easily. Okay, and then it's also hard to get hired again at a decent quality employer because that record sticks with you. And so then that drives guys into working for other people for 1099s, all this kind of stuff. But we don't have a very nurturing approach to this. It's like, you mess up, we're going to get rid of you because it makes us look like we care about safety. And if we let you stay, then I can't defend myself in court because you did this and we knew that and we let you stay on. So it makes it the relationships is very difficult because of that. Everybody's made an example of. Well, he did this, he's got to go.
And there needs to be some driver awareness. I think a lot of your drivers need to learn a lot more about maintenance. And look, I know this industry is hard, but you guys also know it can be very lucrative too, right? But
that's why we're
I
here.
think, yeah, and everybody's in business to make money. The drivers, God love them. I respect the heck out of every truck driver. I'm even kind of starting to do these awareness TikToks about, don't cut off their following distance, give them room to turn, and and things like that. And they do feel like they're getting hit, left and right all the time. So got nothing but love and respect for every single one of them. I thank every one of them for all they do. The things that they could do, I guess, would be, learn a lot more about. I'm just saying the ones that don't. Okay. I know there's a lot of them out there that maybe started in mechanic. So, but learn for the signs, like, for looking for wheel seals leaking and things like that. I mean, grease fires are one of your common things that can burn a trailer down and the cargo inside of it.
Absolutely.
And just, I mean, think about an airplane pilot, for example, and how many things they check, and they're communicating with the mechanic on the outside and all the tests that they run. I mean, that's what you are. You're a pilot of this 80,000 pound monster when it's fully loaded. And you got people all around you all the time. So it's tough. I know it's tough, but
the airways aren't very crowded like the highways are, and you don't have amateurs in the air. You only have professional pilots, but on the surface, you've got a lot of amateurs that you have to deal with the professional drivers. It makes it very challenging. But you make a good point, and you're right. I mean, we talk about that a lot here because with the drivers that we're seeing that are coming into the business, they don't have the background. They didn't grow up on a farm. They didn't tear down cars when they were a teenager and put them back together. I mean, they literally don't know the difference between a hubcap and a radiator cap. And but yet they're out here driving a truck. And it has changed the industry. And I know these old timers are going to call them steering wheel holders, and it's the reason that the trucking industry has gone to hell in a handbasket. But bottom line is the industry has grown to the point where there's not enough kids who grew up on a farm to fill all these jobs. I mean, we gotta have this freight's got to be delivered by somebody. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So
I had an interesting experience with dash cams. I started my career obviously with the big carriers, U.S. Express, Werner, Schneider, and when my truck blew up in April of 17 and I was done, I'm like, well, I had to have a job, so I called Swift. And 7 days later, I was driving one of their trucks, right? And when I was in orientation at Swift, this was in April of 2017. They made this big announcement, and they said, drivers, we have heard your cries, and we care about you, and we are going to turn off your driver-facing dash cams. And the crowd roared, right? So about 3 weeks later, I'm in a truck stop, and it might have been Transport Topics, but it was one of those trucking publications. And they had a big story about driver-facing dash cams and how fleets were being it was being recommended by their attorneys and insurance companies to turn off those driver-facing dash cams because they were more liable. They were more liability than they were worth. And I went, "You sons of bitches! You didn't care anything about what he said. Now I know why you turned it off."
Well, I can. So it's great for coaching, and I've even recommended for some fleets. Maybe you want to turn on the driver facing when it's a new driver. For a few weeks. Let's coach. Let's make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And this is obviously in company owned equipment, not owner operators. Or maybe that can be kind of like, hey, you're on probation. You're going to be on the driver facing cam for the next week or two because you made a bad lane, whatever the case. You can use it for you can still use it, but from a liability standpoint, you're much more likely to uncover liability than if you just had the thing off. And it's sad, but it's true.
Yeah.
I just, for the record, I've been in Richie's truck. I don't want to see what's happening in there.
Yeah. You can't unsee some things, Brian. Okay.
Right.
So
now I do real quick. I want to read what you sent me, this reptile theory, because this is gold and everybody needs to just be thinking about this. The reptile theory is a trial strategy that attempts to use fear and anger to make the jury dislike the defendant so strongly that they will award a plaintiff a grossly excessive amount of damages. The plaintiff's attorney will seek to activate the jurors' survival mode instincts by presenting the defendant's conduct as highly dangerous and worthy of punishment. The defendant's conduct will be portrayed as a threat to the safety of the general public and the award as a deterrent needed to protect the community at large. The reptile theory appeals to the jurors' emotions in place of any rational, impartial evaluation of the evidence. This right here is why, a lot of people they'll look at a situation and go, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about, and you need to go, take your chances with the jury of your peers. Listen, I've been in Facebook comment sections, and I know who are my jury. I know the 12 people are going to come from those comment sections. I don't feel any comfort whatsoever if a slick talking trial lawyer is going to be talking to those people. I'm going to prison. Okay.
I'm gonna tell you that $1 million liability policy that most trucking companies have that isn't going to hold a candle. It's not going to hold a candle.
Yeah, well, trucking companies, of course, they're advocating for, changing and the putting limits on these verdicts, obviously, to stop this, because it's getting. I mean, it's getting very difficult to even. I mean, you as a broker, I'm sure you know this. I mean, I'm sure there's people you just can't. I don't care how much money they want to give you, you can't take it. You can't accept their money because the risk is too high.
Yeah, I mean, the $50,000 claim 5 years ago is a $200,000 claim now, and it's just out of hand. So, we stay pretty involved in the state associations and the TCAs and the ATAs and whatnot to try to do what we can to bring, listen to them, let us, tell us what to do and how we can help. And, a lot of it is just, public awareness. I'm not saying that people shouldn't get what they deserve, what they deserve, but what they, indemnification is to put someone back to the point they were before the time of loss.
Make them whole.
Make them whole again.
Not hit the lottery.
And look, I've been a fleet owner too. I think I told you guys that. I've owned trucks. I've had drivers, and I even owned a trucking company with my own authority for a few years. And I've got dash cam footage of people running into my truck and then telling the police officer he ran into me. We pull up look, if you don't have a dash cam in your truck these days, you're just asking for it. You're asking for it.
And the other
So
thing is you can't be. I mean, we had an incident just not too long ago where a driver didn't even realize that he'd struck a car. Now, he was very trusting and it didn't really protect his rights because he wasn't, how can I say it, Chris? He didn't protect his position because he didn't do it. He didn't take any photographs. Um,
yeah.
we have, and now the scratch on our trailer is barely visible. We don't know what the car looked like because no picture, but now they're claiming bodily injury, So again, cover your own asses out there. Okay. You get involved in something, get witnesses, take pictures, just assume that they're going to try to make a federal case out of it and protect yourself at the time it happened. Certainly don't talk to them and start admitting guilt.
Yeah.
And we've had that happen too, so along the way. But anyway.
Well, you were talking about the trial lawyers, and there's another group of people that I absolutely detest, and it's these safety advocates. They're just narcissistic sociopaths.
This is what I thought Chris thought what I was when I made that.
What?
That's what I was afraid you were thinking about me when you invited me on here. I'm like, he's going to try to roast me.
No, that I've watched over the years as these people, which are they're obsessed with power. They love to be entangled in the government, and they exploit the pain and suffering of people who have lost family members or sons and daughters in accidents with trucks, and they do that. What was it? They seek to use the fear and anger. Right? They're not doing it to a jury. They're doing it to the general public. And it makes me sick because it would be one thing if their education was, hey, well, yeah, my family member was run over by a truck, but, well, here's the context of what happened. Or maybe the truck driver was really negligent. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But they don't ever talk about anything except trying to make people demonize an entire industry and every person that's in it. And I remember that I think it was Truck Safety Coalition. Do you remember when they were trying to get the double 33s, the 33-foot pups? We've got 24s or 26 right now, like FedEx and then pull. And they were trying to get clearance to pull 33-foot trailers instead of 24-foot trailers because they wanted more cubes for all these, Amazon packages and stuff. And they had one of the senators, I don't know if it was Feinstein or Barbara Boxer, one of those. And they brought a day cab with two 33-foot trailers to Washington, and they parked it out in front of the Capitol. And they set up their podium. And the lady's like, this truck is as long as an 8-story building. And I'm like, you know what my 53-foot trailer with my sleeper truck, you know what the length of my trailer is? It's exact same as that one. But it was just fear. Just make everybody terrified. Those trucks aren't going to be any heavier. They're under the same weight limits that aren't. They want more cubic space to hold your Amazon crap, people. That's what they wanted. But, the average, never mind. I'm not going to go there. But that's what I see. It's the sensationalism. It's trying to get people to have an emotional reaction instead of a logical consideration of something. And I despise those people as much as I do the ambulance chasers, because really they're no different to me. Now, I would like you to talk a little more about your experience owning trucks, because you have the experience that we can talk about this lease versus authority thing from the perspective of doing it and the perspective of insuring it. So give us a little thumbnail of what your experience was owning trucks.
So owning trucks under my own authority, you want to start with that? Okay.
Yeah.
So when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I even, I borrowed $40,000, this is years ago, from a family member And it still wasn't enough. even financing the truck and the trailer, it wasn't enough. But it started with one. I did have a client that was going to let me run some of their freight. And so at least I had something to start with. It was a little nerve wracking. So started with one, and the driver that I hired, as great as he was, he still didn't really know anything about truck mechanics. So when something started to go wrong, he didn't really know how to either tell me or understand that it was going wrong at all. So,
Right.
Pretty big repair bills, pretty tough time, and that trend continued as I added 3 or 4 before I really realized it. So probably a year and a half in or so, I changed directions and said, I'm going to make sure that the drivers know how to keep an eye on the reefer trailers and, the tires and make sure they know a little more about what they're talking about, because, drivers are pulling over on you in a heartbeat. Oh yeah, I know everything. So, so after about 3 years,
you gotta talk to him about medicine and law. Okay, they're really good at those subjects. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I ended up, things were okay. I had some dedicated freight. I did get into hauling like avocados across the country, and we had kind of a system, kind of a relay system going on for a little while. And, I ended up shutting it down. And I did hire an owner operator or two for a little while too, but I let it run for 3 years. And honestly, the reason why I did that was because I wanted to know everything that I could learn from that experience for my clients and for the benefit of them, and just the benefit of my future in insurance. So that, when somebody says that their BOC3 went inactive, or I guess that would be something that I would know. I don't know. I wanted to learn more. So I did that. I got out of it at the beginning of 2019, 3 years almost on the day. Probably won't ever do that again. It was tough. And, you hire someone to handle dispatch and compliance and paperwork. And then, sometimes you find problems with that, and you can't ever get someone, it seems like, to do it as thoroughly or as accurately as you would do yourself. So that's difficult. That's difficult to do. My second experience in trucking was I had a friend of mine who was looking for a truck driving job. He had 4 or 5 years of experience, and I knew that he knew mechanics. And so I started looking for an opportunity to put him in a truck, and freight was booming. This was, into 2020, first of 2021. And one of my broker clients actually told me about an opportunity. So instead of restarting the trucking company and the authority and all of that, I bought the truck, leased it on to a motor carrier, one of my clients, and put the driver in it and ran the freight that I brought to the table as well. And that worked out a lot better in that situation for me. We actually turned some profit in 2021. And for different reasons, I ended up with 3 or 4 trucks, but for different reasons, my drivers kind of, like one went active duty in the military. One was just sick and tired of driving trucks. And, for different reasons, I let it fizzle out, and I happened to sell the trucks at a good time in the market, and I got very fortunate on that. So, but the lease option worked a lot better for me than running their own authority. Especially, I've got a lot. I'm very busy with insurance, so I don't have time to run a trucking company too.
Yeah. Well, and like we've said on this so many times that we do not believe that getting an authority is bad or wrong or terrible. You shouldn't do it. What we believe is that if you are a first-time owner-operator, you should absolutely not get your own authority. You should learn how to run a business under the protection of a motor carrier. We choose Landstar for many reasons, but that if you take on that much responsibility when you're a brand new business, that it can be disastrous, and that you absolutely shouldn't do that.
And I would agree with you wholeheartedly on that. If you don't have any experience, dispatching or getting customer freight, or any experience in compliance, much less having to manage the expenses and the revenue of your own truck, I don't think you should get an authority. I don't think you're ready to get your own federal authority yet.
Yeah,
that's my.
It's just
it's
a huge responsibility, and if it's just risk. And what we talk about so much here is success in business being about managing risk. And if you're not managing risk, and you're not accepting, that's the thing that kills me about some of these people that fight us so hard. I'm like, listen, if you would just address the elephant in the room, that it's at least more risky than being leased. But so many times they don't want to do that. They just want to, like a monkey, they just want to fling feces at you, but it's just risky. And if you want to have a trucking business that lasts, you need to start it slow, and you need to learn all this stuff like maintenance and mechanics and accounting. And so it's just so risky to do it that way.
Well, and like Brian said, he was busy running the business. He didn't have time to learn how to be the regulatory and the compliance and all the requirements that are required to keep your MC number going. Because if you don't do those things, they take it away from you. That's the whole purpose of the new entrant audit, is to make sure that you're doing all these things that you're supposed to do. Well, most people who get their own authority are driving the truck. They're in the same situation. They're busy driving a truck. Guess what gets let go? All the details about keeping compliant and meeting the regulations, and that's what we maintain here. You can pay somebody that's really good at doing that, because regardless of what carrier it is, they got whole departments that take care of this and this and this and this while you're out here driving your truck. Yeah, you've got to give up some percentage to do that. But Brian, yourself, even if you're doing it yourself, it costs you something to do it, or it's not going to be done and it's going to cost you anyway. So, I mean, the argument we always hear is that I don't want to give up, in our case, 35%. But yet nobody looks down and says, okay, what does it cost? And you brought it up before we got on the air. What is if the revenues were the same, what would the nets be between the two? Because you still have to pay those different items out. You just pay it to different people instead of one person. You still got to have insurance. You still got to have a trailer. All the things that you pay a carrier a percentage to do for you, you're not limited or eliminated from doing that. You're just doing it on your own, maybe at a higher price because you're not getting the benefit of the discounts. You're in the business right now where most people who are starting their own authority have to deal with a pretty stiff insurance rate because they don't have the what's it called, the incident factor. What's the word that you use when you rate people based on the number of accidents or tickets they've had or whatever? There's a term for
a ratio or a percentage or something.
You're not thinking about loss ratio, are you?
Yeah, well, something like that. I mean, obviously,
yeah. So you're a new motor carrier, and you go out and hit the load board, and you realize 9 out of 10 brokers won't work with you, for example,
right,
for the first 6 months, and you're paying, really high insurance rates,
right? And especially the first year, because you don't have a track record. An insurance company wants to see your track record, and if you're brand new, you're a higher risk to them. So. Anyway, we get in this argument quite often, and usually when we're talking to people who are doing it for the first time, insurance becomes we've got a couple of fleets with authority that have talked to us about bringing trucks to us, and one of them literally said, "My insurance company will not accept my check." You know, I'm losing my authority because I cannot insure my fleet. What do you do?
Yeah, that's probably a situation where they went to the last resort, and then it got canceled for late pay or whatever, and then they finally said, "We're not reinstating you because
Right.
we've gotten to this point too many times. You're too much of a risk."
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
In their mind, in their eyes, that's what it
Sure.
sounds like. Okay.
Sure.
So Phil's got a good question here. Phil is our platform dispatcher and platform driver extraordinaire. So we have a group set up in our Signal where everybody that does platform has to send pictures of their securement to be signed off on by Phil. And I've learned a ton just watching and reading this. And his question is, can you talk about proper load securement and its relation to accident insurance claims?
Am I still muted?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Okay. Well, and the DOT has the regulations there for a reason. Load securement is extremely important. You get a load shift and all of a sudden you become top heavy, or you could, you go to brake and you reduce your stopping distance because the car goes back there moving. I don't know how to talk about its relationship, its relation to accidents, but I mean, obviously something falls off of that trailer or out of that trailer, it's most likely cause an accident.
I think a good example. He put a video in the group today. He's hauling I think it's a 14 wide piece of flat steel, right? And he's like, well, he was there, and a bunch of people were throwing straps over it and taking off. Well, he put chains on it, and then he put X chains at the front, and he put X chains at the back. Well, the X chains on the front, I understood because I don't want that thing coming through the back of my cab. And he's like, well, somebody walked up, well, why are you putting X chains on the back? And he's like, well, what happens if I get cut off, car runs me off the road and that load hits something, a concrete barrier, where's it going? Backwards. Well, now the front chains are loose. So if it hits something and it goes backwards and then I'm out of control and I hit something, guess what it's going to do now? And so those are those extra steps that are not just common sense for self preservation. It's what happens if the worst case scenario, and I think that's probably where we struggle a lot with getting people to understand moving from company driver to owner operator. You've got to think about the worst case scenario because it could happen.
Yeah.
So how are you going to prepare yourself? How are you going to indemnify yourself? What steps are you going to take now that it's your butt on the line? Whereas before, you were just a company driver. Well, if you didn't secure, what a big deal. Now it's you.
Yeah. You may, right. So you have some more risk in the game now as when you may not have as a company driver. It's, load securement's extremely important. It's like, to haul liquids, you've got to have a tanker's endorsement, right? It doesn't matter if the liquid's in totes. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because they're preparing you for how the vehicle feels and how it changes when it maneuvers. So yeah, from a risk management standpoint, that is very important. Reminder, however, that company drivers are also, you're the driver of this truck. You're the pilot of this truck. You're responsible from the front bumper to the rear DOT bumper and everything within. And so, so there's a lot of your shippers that won't let you inspect the load inside the trailer and how it's secured before they shut the doors and put the seal on it. Driver, you're responsible.
Mm-hmm.
You're responsible. So keep that in mind.
I am to this day probably on a list at a Dollar General DC banned from the property because
Imagine that.
Because they throw all the boxes in there.
yeah. Well, they have these. They call them rolltainers. It's like a big shopping cart, right? They put all their stuff in, and then you have a lift gate, and you roll in the store. Well, the guys in the warehouse were bad about not securing those with a strap. They had this strap that would hook, and so many times. I mean, I got hurt on that got hit in the face with boxes of bleach and about had my arms tore off, And so I'd kind of had enough of their lack of securement. So I would always check, at least to make sure the last row had a strap on it, because I didn't
So
want
that
to
when
open
you
the
open
doors.
the door, it doesn't all fall on you.
Correct. Well, they had this smart ass that worked at the guard shack, and by the time I walked from the truck to the back, he had already sealed the trailer. And I'm like, dude, I need to check my securement. And he was like, too bad. So I turned around and went back to the traffic office. And by the time I got done with the conversation, I was banned from Dollar General for the rest of my life. And, so my face is probably on the wall, somewhere up there. But I'm like, guys, because I wanted them to break the seal, let me inspect it, put a new seal on it. Absolutely not. So words were said and things were uttered and mothers were talked about, and that's how it.
Such a shock.
Shit
Can't
happens,
believe
That's great. my trucks have pulled that freight, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
So is platform are platform fleets, are they more expensive to insure than van fleets?
No,
No? Okay.
Interesting.
they're not.
Are they
And
less?
So when you say platform, you mean flatbed or RGN, drop
Yeah,
deck,
yeah,
all of
yeah,
those that
yeah.
qualify
Yeah.
as flatbed, right? And insurance rates can vary so much by state and by type of operation that it's hard to say sometimes. But what I can tell you is that there are some insurance companies that shy away from flatbeds. And it may have been because they had a bad experience one time. Something may have fallen off and hurt somebody real bad. And like, we don't ever want to deal with this again. Just don't do flatbeds anymore. So could it put you in a situation where there's, instead of 3 or 4 really competitive insurance companies get competitive on your account versus only 2 or 3 because that one didn't want to do flatbed? Possibly. But it's incorrect to make a broad statement to say that it costs more in insurance to run a flatbed operation, because that's false.
Have you had any experience with fleets that like do the big high wide and heavy stuff, the specialized oversized?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Interestingly enough, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, interestingly enough, trucking companies that haul hazmat, as long as everything is, rocking and rolling good, can have cheaper insurance. And that's because they're see his eyebrows. And that's because they're specialized and they know the drivers are highly qualified in
Easy
in a lot
now.
more.
Careful.
Hey, general strokes. Okay. I'm not talking about everybody every time. but I think that hazardous material haulers or motor carriers tend to have a better track record because of the nature of business. Now, the track record of the niche market is what drives the rate. It's not the other way around. So,
right.
It is what it is.
Well, I can tell you this: Landstar has a hazmat department that is absolutely second to none. I mean, they're incredible. I went to a shipper in Kentucky one time, and I always would take a picture of my paperwork, send it to hazmat, have them review it, and she was like, oh, well, the proper shipping name's wrong, and that's wrong, and I went back in and I'm like, hey, we need to fix this. And the guy's like, well, I've never had anybody else saying that. I'm like, well, I don't care about anybody else. I'm telling you that it's wrong and we're going to fix it. And he's like, well, I ain't going to do it. I said, well, unload it. He's like, you would have me unload this trailer. I said, listen, brother, let me explain this to you. Landstar has a dungeon in Jacksonville, and they have a bunch of people kidnapped, and all they do is feed them hazmat paperwork, okay? I promise you, they have forgotten more than you ever hope to learn. So if she says we're going to change it, we're by God going to change it, or you go unload it. He got the whiteout out and he changed it, you know. But I mean, but the thing is, if you call them, if you'll do something so simple as email a picture of your paperwork to them and have them sign off on it, they will follow you and defend you to the end. But if you don't, good luck to you, you know, because you had the opportunity to have them sign off on your paperwork. But I've seen guys roll up to haul totes, you know, and they set the totes in the back and they slam the doors and take off. And here I am putting a strap on every one. And the guy's like, well, I've never seen anybody else do that before. And I'm like, well, you know, it's the law. You know, it's literally law that you have to strap these down, every single one, you know. Oh, I've never seen a driver do that before. Well, okay.
How many times have we heard that?
Plenty. Here's a question. Does anyone offer loss of use insurance? I would expect that the premiums for that on a new unreliable truck would reveal the major hidden cost of buying or leasing a new truck. That's a hell of a way to word that.
That's a little bit of a only on this podcast would you get that question, okay?
I get the question. Let me dissect the rest of this for a moment. I would expect that the premiums for on a new unreliable. Okay, I get it. Okay,
he's making the statement. He's making the statement there. Okay, the question is loss of revenue, loss of income, interrupted income. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called downtime coverage, and you know, some insurance policies will have it with a stipulation on it that it doesn't start paying anything until after 30 days, because you should be able to get a truck, a truck after an accident repaired within 30 days. But it probably there's only a few insurance companies that actually offer that. A few of your top tier insurance companies, but they end up paying you like $130 or $150 a day. Like, it's not much money. So, that's, and I'm glad you guys are out here educating the public on awareness and the cost and the risk of being in business, because insurance companies aren't going to pay for everything. They're just not. You know, your truck breaks down, they're not going to pay for that. You know, some of them have mechanical breakdown towing as a throw-in up to a certain limit or whatnot. Even that has a deductible, though. But there are many, many risks of being in the trucking business. There are many regulations to follow. There are a lot of things to think about. I think you guys are exactly on point when you say the company drivers need to experience some of that risk, you know, before getting their own authority. I would wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't handle insurance on new authorities unless they're a referral and they've got a business plan and a damn good resume. Now, I've helped companies get started before that had never had their authority, and helped them grow to 50, 100 plus trucks. But it's not for everybody, and it's displayed. It's on display for us by the fact that over half of them don't make it past a year or two.
Yeah.
So fully agree with you guys that you need to become an owner operator. You need to get adapted and get adjusted, understand what it takes. And I would even go a step further and you know, under many circumstances, most of your business models that end up successful have customer freight. They have customer freight. They have it.
As far as having their own authority, as the reason for having the authority, because they have direct customer freight. Yeah, I would agree.
Because so many people get in the business, they get their own authority, and they run the load board.
Right.
I mean, anybody can do that, you know. And you're competing with the masses for the crumbs.
Yeah. Well, and I think. And I've said this, you know, look, if your long life desire was to build a trucking company that, you know, does sales calls and gets its own freight, I can understand getting started with an authority. Now, not after you've not been leased for a couple of years and got a sound business, but personally, I mean, I'd rather be punched in the face by Mike Tyson than do a sales call. Like that is That's a seventh level of hell for me to think the idea of going and knocking on somebody's door and trying to get freight. I'd rather no. I'd
That's one
rather
of the
be locked
benefits
in
you
a
guys
phone
have.
booth with an alligator.
That's
know?
one of the benefits you guys have with Landstar is Landstar has a lot of, tons
Hell
and
yeah, they
tons
do.
of customer freight. You
Oh,
guys
yeah.
get picked from that.
I said, I don't remember. I think it was the 8 or 9 favorite words I've ever heard was, "I wanted to call you before I posted this." I mean, there's nothing more I love to hear when my phone rings and an agent says, "Hey, I wanted to call you before I posted this." Yeah, you did. You know, but that comes from years of relationship building and them knowing that if I have a truck available, that truck is not going to screw them over. That truck's going to communicate. They're going to pick up on time. They're going to deliver on time. And it's taken a long time to build those relationships, and I'm happy to have them. But I will also very gladly pull a third-party C.H. Robinson load because if the check clears, I don't give a damn who's paying for it. Doesn't matter to me. It could be quadruple brokered. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Pay me, and I'll haul it. That's all I'm worried about. Now, here's a question, and I think there's a couple of ways in. It says, I need UIIA insurance for the port. I'm in Norfolk, Virginia, new authority. How much? So would you like to offer a website address or phone number? Because obviously giving quotes on the podcast is not a good idea, but how would you like to be contacted for stuff like this?
We have a little portal that's easy to remember. It's CIA-trucking.com. Let me verify that real quick. It's been a little while. CIA-trucking.com. Yep, that's it. CIA-trucking.com. And if they'll fill that form out, it'll go to one of my team members, and one of us will reach out.
Okay.
Why don't you explain to people what UIIA insurance is?
So UIIA is Uniform Intermodal. What's the rest of that? Uniform Intermodal Interchange Agreement, something like that. And it is a contract that you must adhere to if you're going to pull any freight that is at the ports or at most rail yards. So when you decide to pull freight from ports or rail yards, there's even more regulation and stuff that you got to get through in that contract. And they normally provide, they have a chassis pool. And
That's
I have clients that they use the chassis pool, for best results from a CSA vehicle maintenance basic standpoint. You want to have your own chassis with LED lights and good stripes, reflective stripes and all that good stuff, and good tires. Because what happens is intermodal companies, they go into the port and they're there to pick up a load, and they're there to get it, and the chassis has problems. Well, now the driver is going to ignore those problems. Otherwise, he's going to be sitting there waiting on the chassis pool shop for 2 hours or more, or they might have to take that box and put it on a different chassis, or who knows what. And so they get a lot of DOT violations because of the lack of, patience with the chassis pool. But anyway, the UIIA agreement requires the motor carrier to carry trailer interchange insurance coverage, which is a form of physical damage for those trailers that are covered under that agreement, meaning the chassis pull trailers.
Chassis,
the chassis. So even if you have your own chassis, you still have to sign the agreement. You still have to have the coverage too.
So I never knew that. So you can in intermodal, you can own your own chassis, and then they just set the box on you.
You can.
Oh, that's cool. Well, because listen, I've watched a bunch of those containers go up and down the road, and I'm like, I've seen it. I've seen it. Yeah. No thanks. I'll pass.
So
the scary one. Go ahead. I was just going to say the scary ones are the short 20-footers that are overweight.
Yeah.
So back to the interruption of revenue coverage. That kind of a spinoff of that, though, is mechanical breakdown coverage. Is that a truck insurance product, or is that like a repair industry? In other words, do you write that? Does that come from truck insurance companies, or does that come from mechanical shop
Like a
side of
warranty
the house?
coverage note. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually a part of some insurance companies' policies. They offer it as an additional, value added endorsement, or you can maybe buy it along with a group of other like deluxe type coverages. But yeah, mechanical breakdown towing, they normally have a sub limit in there of like $2,500 or something, and then they'll
No,
have
I meant
a
I meant
miniature.
I meant I meant warranty on the actual repairs, like you blow an engine and you get your engine replaced. That kind of warranty.
No, no,
Okay.
no. The insurance doesn't really offer warranties of any kind.
On that topic, little sidebar. There's some kind of thing you can buy through Landstar. It's a warranty. And I was thinking about this the other day because I've got a client that's down right now with an engine problem. And I talked to the shop, and the guy was like, well, he's going to be down 2 or 3 weeks probably. And I'd never thought of the question before until I went, I wonder what that answer would have been if he wasn't waiting on warranty approval. Because we know what's wrong with the truck. It needs a front cover and it needs a gear, right? If he could just stroke a check or swipe his card, I wonder how much faster his truck gets repaired than waiting on all of this warranty approval stuff, because people they put way, way, way too much faith. I even saw in a Landstar group today, it was like the 10 things that you should have in your business. And number one was, well, you better have a 2019 to 2022 truck with a warranty. And I'm going, good luck with that, because as Larry has said so eloquently many times, run on down to the dealership, walk in the driver's waiting room and ask them what year their truck is. Promise you it's not a 2007, and they're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. So it seems like if you don't understand basic insurance, you don't understand warranties, these companies have to make a profit. All right? They're not going to do anything other than what they need to do, contractually need to do. But if you don't even understand how it works, and so many people don't, which is why we have you here, you can make decisions that are counterproductive and risky to your business, thinking that you have a safety net that doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to take a 30-second break. I'll be right back.
All right.
Sure. We have a much calmer group tonight. We don't have any.
I haven't seen any trolls yet.
I know we've lost the trolls tonight. I guess they didn't want to hear about insurance. So
That's a boring topic. Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, here's a question: is it insurance or is it insurance? That depends on what part of the country.
Depends on where you live. Yeah.
Let's see if there's any comments that we can answer while he's gone. Richie wants live from Landstar Indy featuring Larry Long.
That might be pay-per-view. Okay. So
here's a question that came up in the comments. Does Landstar have the same percentage of drop and hook in flatbed as in dry van? That would be no.
No,
there are no drop and hook opportunities in. Of course, Phil's been answering all these questions here in the comments, but I figured I'd bring it up for the rest of. Rocky had a comment here. It is crazy, Larry. Now Rocky is MD Alignment shop in Jacksonville. He says if I were to dismount or mount tires, it's almost $85,000 a year for insurance, and that's why I don't touch tires. Lord have mercy.
Really. No wonder tires are expensive.
Yeah. This must have been in relation to your crack about TA. The best TA could offer would be a half-price meal at Country Pride.
It reminds me. I'm sure everybody knows about Southwest Strand and all. They canceled 6,000 or 60,000. Anyway, they left people sitting for a week during Christmas, and you know what they're offering to the customers? 25,000 air mile points.
Oh, yeah.
That's supposed to make you. So now that won't buy a round trip ticket. So now you have to spend more money to use their point offer to go back to somebody that screwed you over and left you in the airport over Christmas.
Well, there was a fantastic TikTok. This lady, she was like, I would like to present to you my Rain Man husband, who will explain what happened with Southwest. And he just rolls off, and he made it said, most airlines are hub to hub, and Southwest is not, and so they're not doing Atlanta we're in a back and forth, and so once their thing gets screwed up, all hell breaks loose, and that's pretty much what happened to them.
Well, all the pilots and all the people predicted it. They weren't surprised by it at all. And anyway, we're off the topic here. So
okay,
we're way off the rails, Brian. So we need you to bring us back. There's a couple questions there.
Let's do Luke. My question is regarding to freight brokerage firms. I know some brokers carry cargo insurance just in case the carrier's insurance denies a claim, but do they carry any other insurance? I'm trying to.
Okay, so yes, they're they're in business too. So there's a lot of different things they may cover. Or they may different type of policies they may have, but cargo is tough for freight brokers. A lot of those policies only want to cover what the motor carrier's policy would have covered. I don't really want to get into that. It's a lot to talk about. It's a heavy subject, but they also carry contingent auto liability coverage because brokers get brought into lawsuits all the time too. If there's a real bad accident, the attorney's going to bring everybody in. They'll bring the shipper, the broker, maybe even the manufacturer of the equipment. Who knows? So they do their normal business insurance, their EPLI, maybe their E&O and general liability, and they have contingent auto liability in many cases also. Of course, they also have their freight broker bond, which is required by FMCSA to make sure that motor carriers get paid. So yes, they do carry other types of insurance.
Now here's a question that I can't believe I didn't think to ask. Thank you, Evan. Do you guys purchase bobtail insurance, or use bobtail insurance when you purchase a new truck? How do you get a purchased truck home? Because Larry and I have had this conversation so many times about trying to move a truck because if we get one leased onto Landstar, it's covered. I mean, from the very minute it passes the inspection, they sign off on the paperwork, we're covered. But until then, if I've got a truck sitting in Missouri and I need to get it to West Virginia, how do I cover myself when I'm not leased to a carrier?
That's a doozy. And I've got to be careful how I answer this because I'm answering it to the public and I don't want to say anything that people can take and use against me later.
I will tell you this.
We'll say there's a way to do it.
Well, there's damn few options. I will tell you this. Okay. And the one of the options that's the easiest to find, they'll do it, but you have to give them your business for 1 year. I'm not going to say who that was, who it is, but they'll write it, but you have to commit to a year of coverage. We have found a couple of other off and on that have done, but nobody consistently. It is a problem. It affects a lot of times our decision about trucks, or if we're buying a truck from another Landstar BCO, we listen. I offer to pay whatever it takes to leave it in the system till I can pick it up, because that's a hell of a lot cheaper than me trying to find insurance for it. It's very difficult to do. I wish you could write this. You can write this, we might give you our insurance. So I'm gonna dangle a little carrot
about that.
I'm gonna dangle a little carrot on it. So
there are ways to do it, and I've got to be careful about what I say on the air because there's a way to do it legitimately. but it's there's
So,
some gray area in
so
there.
what's it called? I mean, it's because what you're after is liability.
Well, it's
You're not
commercial insurance. So it's commercial
right,
insurance. So if you're buying a truck to go into business, right? But let's say
right.
I'm assuming this gentleman is a person, and okay, let's say he buys it personally. If you buy the truck personally, call your personal insurance company, your personal insurance agent, and say, "Hey, I bought a truck. It's not going to be used for business yet, right? So what are you doing with it? Well, I'm using it for personal use. Well, could you call it recreational? Maybe. Could you and between the point of the time where you've got a bill of sale and you've actually registered it, there's a period in there. If that bill of sale has your personal name on it and not a business name, you're not using it for company use. Could you be taking it home to put in your yard and fix up, turn it to an RV? Just saying.
Could be.
You might be able to do that. You have to check with your own lawyer, your own agent about that stuff. Don't ask me about that if you do that. But if you're a business, let's say if he's got his own authority, he's absolutely got to put it on his policy. I'm assuming that this would be somebody that's thinking about leasing on or something like that. I understand that is tough, but anybody can go to Progressive's website and do a quote for their company and get a short-term policy. You might have to book it as an annual policy and cancel it when you're done with it.
That's
That's
exactly
another way to get that done.
That's another way of doing it. I'm guilty of that. I hate to admit that but it was my last resort. Is I had to go through the whole thing like I'm giving them this business, and 2 weeks later I canceled. Now I don't know if they'll let me do it again.
I want to say there might be a program out there that's built for this. You would have to do some Google searching on it.
Yeah.
So
well,
this leads me to two secondary questions. One is, and I know a guy that did this. He's got a big, like $150,000 fifth wheel. It's a doozy. He bought a retired Freightliner Columbia, single axle that used to be a FedEx truck, and he turned it into his fifth wheel hauler, and he registered it with the state as an RV. So his insurance company, I guess, is just treating that like a recreational vehicle, even though it's a Class 8 truck.
I've done it before. I've done it before, and being in racing, we've got to haul some pretty big trailers around sometimes. So and I've got friends that race that are also trucking company owners, and they get those things classified as RVs. They get on their regular insurance policy, and it's it's dirt cheap. But you've got your business lines you can't cross, and that's why I was saying you got to be careful about that. The thing needs to be in your personal name. It can't have an apportion tag on it, so use
Right.
proceed with caution and know what you're doing if you're going to try something like that. It needs to not have your company associated with it if you're going to do that.
Okay. My
like
secondary
anything, if nothing goes wrong, it's no problem. It's just what happens when shit goes wrong, and now you've called it this, and it's really not, and you get the hammer involved, and there's a lot of exposure there, Brian.
Yeah, but excellent question, Evan, and do some Google research in there, I would say, and see if you can find some sort of trip insurance or something. It seems like there used to be a program there.
My secondary question to that is, if, like for us, we're looking for lunatic trucks, and I would love to find a $5,000 truck, but maybe it don't run. Maybe it's got a bad transmission, and I'd love to have a toter, to hook on my fifth wheel and go get it. Right. Well, we don't know how Landstar would feel about that. We can't really, I don't know, because do we have to cover it up? Do we have to, what do we have to do? Or what if we just had a truck that wasn't Landstar, that Blue Ribbon owned, that we had, I guess what I'm getting to, does a product exist that if we had a truck that we weren't using to haul freight with, but I had a toter on it and I used it to go get a truck and bring it back, and all it did was sit here, not for hire. We're not going to pull anybody else's stuff. But does a product exist for that? I guess is what I'm getting at.
you would need to consult with Landstar about that first, because if it's being used in the business of Landstar, then
Right. I'm
they
saying
might
if
be.
it wasn't, if we just
I
had a
understand.
spare.
So what you would right? Well, what I'm saying is even if you had a spare, like, who are you going to register it to? Are you going to register it to Blue Ribbon? Well, now Blue Ribbon's under contract with Landstar. See what I'm saying?
Oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
if you started like a separate entity and you said it was Blue Ribbon's Toter LLC, then yeah, you could get some commercial insurance and liability to be able to use that as a spare truck to go fetch trucks with. And which is
regular commercial liability would cover that,
yes,
including the truck you're towing.
yes. Well, yeah. I mean, you've got physical damage on that truck already, right?
Yeah, you should. I mean, I think obviously, yeah. I mean, obviously, you have a truck that you're using as the toter, and you have a truck you're buying, so you do have some financial exposure. So I guess you would want to have physical damage on one or both, to at least cover the case of a loss. But the big thing is the liability, because those.
So if you did this under a different, like, LLC or a different business, then under that insurance policy where you're a tow truck but you're not for hire, you also want the on hook coverage to cover whatever you're hauling with it. So that would work. That would work if you had and the reason why I say consult with Landstar, there's probably other BCOs that do this, that have an extra truck sitting by with a boom attached to it, ready to go fetch trucks that are broke down. Happens quite frequently.
But this is the type of scenario. Listen, I am a 100% ask forgiveness rather than permission guy. But this is not one of those scenarios where I necessarily want to do that, right? Because if it goes bad, I don't want the thing to come loose and take out a minivan, and then Landstar's like, what the hell are you doing? Canceled, and put everything that we do at risk for a $5,000 truck, or really what it turns out to be a $2,500 tow bill. We could have towed it for that. But it's just one of those things we've thought about so many times that we never really could get the answer. Does the product exist? Is it viable? Is it something that we could do?
Well, being contracted like you guys are, if if Blue Ribbon has purchased a truck and you're driving that truck back, your liability is already covered.
Not if we don't have it leased on. Not if we don't have that truck leased on the Landstar.
Having been inspected, it has to pass a pre-lease inspection. Now, once it does, and they give us a truck number, covered.
Gotcha.
Instantly.
So you guys are talking about fetching these trucks while they're disabled or while they need work, getting them back home so that you can work on them before you lease them on. Okay.
Correct.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, because we can't lease them on until they've been inspected. Well, they're not going to pass inspection most of the time without a lot of work. So we got to either do the work there, which is to our disadvantage because now we're trusting people that we don't know. If we got it back to where our network is, then we don't have that problem. But the problem is getting it back. It's always been a problem with us. Is trying to get a truck that we've purchased back to West Virginia and have it properly insured. And like I say, we've done it 2 or 3 different ways. I'm not sure I can go back and repeat some of them because I don't. There may be bridges burned there because I had. I'm sorry.
Well, it's if it's in 500 miles, we're gonna tow it. I'm gonna call the wrecker service and say go get it and bring it back. It's gonna be a couple grand. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a big deal. But if I see a truck I really, really like that's in Texas or Nebraska or, upper Midwest, and it's 1,000, 1,500 miles, and I could drive up there in a rental car with a bunch of toolboxes and get it running enough to either drive it back or I had a toter and could go get it at a fraction of the cost of what the wrecker would get. That's where we limit ourselves in the trucks that we can find to the area because we either A, can't drive it because we can't figure out the insurance, or B, we couldn't go get it with a toter because we don't know that part of it. So if we could solve one of those 2 issues, then we're good.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
would
we're trying to
say
figure out.
step one, consult with your friends at Landstar about, towing your own.
We have opened that discussion with a couple of different people with promises that they get back to us. And good thing we weren't holding our breath. So
Okay, gotcha.
one of those-
I think the
they
big
don't
picture
think they
here.
want to answer it. So
I think
You're
the big
safe.
picture here is once this podcast is over, I'm gonna consult with my friend at CIA trucking.com and get
I'm
the
calling
answers
the
that I
CIA.
can't get.
Yeah,
The risk-free way to do that is to pay the tow bill, man.
that's true.
Well, yeah,
How can I
Yeah.
possibly be looking like the Pope tonight?
that is a
Somebody. How can that? Do you mean the one that just died? The one they just put in the grotto? Is that the one?
yeah.
Pope.
So
I could be mistaken for a lot of things, but the
Yeah.
Pope is not on the top 20. Okay, so
Here's a great question from William. William was one of our program participants and a really, really sharp guy. How do I start my own insurance brokerage?
Well, I've actually done that before. I was
Yeah,
25 years. I was 25 years old, and I had worked at a large brokerage for a couple of years, and I realized some things about them that I didn't want to know. So I left to be 25 years old, I left a huge book of business behind because I was under a non-compete agreement, and stepped out on a leap of faith, man. And I was successful. I did it right. I did it good. But to start your own insurance brokerage, you got to have everything a business has, but you've also got to know the market, and you've got to be able to get those insurance company contracts, and you have to be able to get your business insurance, just like any business, and that can be costly. But I don't have not really prepared to answer with 5 or 10 steps on how to do that,
Yeah.
But there's a lot on the internet about it.
Well, obviously, you've got to have relationships with the product, which is the insurance companies. You're basically the go-between. You've got your customers that need insurance, and you've got insurance companies that need customers. You're putting it together, in the most simplistic way. But like you say, there's a lot of knowledge base that's got to go on there for you to understand how that works, I'm sure. So, like any
Absolutely.
business, it looks easy until you go to do it, and then you find out that there's things about it that you don't know shit about, so.
Yeah, you got to have software. There's a lot.
Well, William, he's a pretty ambitious person. He's always looking for the opportunity. So, it doesn't surprise me that he asked that question.
That's good.
Yeah, he got almost 8 miles a gallon out of a 2001 Classic with a big hood. So he's the
That's
guy
impressive.
that pays attention to the details. Yeah.
He's
Very impressive.
I kept getting him to see if he'd open his shirt, see if I see a red S there somewhere, because he was our fuel mileage champion the whole time he was here. He could take. Oh, we always prided ourselves on Chris and I being the best fuel mileage guys till he came along, and then he made us look bad.
He smoked us all.
Yeah, he did.
Well, and William's living proof that when we say drivers 35% of fuel mileage.
Absolutely.
A driver don't have anything to do with it. Oh, honey. Oh, precious. The driver has everything to do with fuel mileage, okay?
Yeah.
I would bet your guess it's probably 50% of fuel mileage as a driver.
Especially in the 2001 Classic.
We're almost 2 hours. You have anything else you would like to add to this conversation? I'm going to put your website back up here so that people can find you.
Yeah, and also com-ins.com is our main website. That one's just like a little portal for contacting us.
Okay.
So com-ins.com is our actual company website.
Is that com? How do you do that? COM
-ins.com.
All right.
Sorry, Larry.
Like
No, I was just thanking you
Like
for
that?
agreeing to come on tonight.
is that
That's it?
correct? Okay.
Yes, sir. That's correct. Yeah. I really appreciate you guys too. I enjoy your podcast. I enjoy your TikTok videos, and hopefully, I'm trying to learn a thing or two about some social media following. So, appreciate you guys having me on, and thanks for the invite.
It's really easy. If you piss enough people off, the algorithm just says, "Oh, well, here you go." You know,
We're pretty good at that, you know. So
Yeah. It's a gift.
That's great.
it's
That's great.
it's an acquired talent, you know.
Well,
But
yeah,
you know,
well,
but honestly, our audience has a lot of time on their hands. They spend 10, 12, 14 hours a day in a truck. So, you know, if our audience were, you know, doctors, I don't know if it would work because those guys can't sit around and listen to stuff all day long like drivers can. So it just works out that
Yeah.
we've got an audience that having a radio on and listening, they can do that while they're working, and they're looking for something to keep them occupied anyway. So it just works out.
Speaking of truck drivers, one thing that we didn't mention is, you know, if you've received a DOT violation, it's not a
yeah.
warning. DOT officers calling it warnings, they need to be corrected. They are DOT violations. They come within a roadside inspection normally. And if it's improper or incorrect, you can ask the motor carrier that you're under lease with or that you drive for, ask them if they know how to go on the FMCSA portal and perform a data queue, because that exists to try to help, you know, fix the errors that can come with DOT inspections. And I know this is a sensitive topic for Chris, but but that's what the motor carrier can use. And if the motor carrier can get that corrected, and drivers, keep your evidence, take your pictures. If a DOT officer claims that your service airline is chafed beyond the reinforcement ply and you don't agree with it, take a picture of it. You know, submit it through that data queue portal on the FMCSA website and dispute it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm looking at their website, and it says you can create an account as a driver. But do you
That's
think
correct.
you have to go through the carrier?
I know that if the motor carrier can get it relieved from the record, it comes off. I believe it comes off the drivers too. But yes, you're absolutely right, and I should have mentioned that the drivers can create their own account.
Okay. Yeah, there's an FAQ on here, so you can go. It's on the FMCF. Just Google data queue, and it comes up, and they got all kinds of information on there.
the only problem with data queue is you're basically, you know, you may have mentioned this too, and when your thing, it goes right back to the officer that wrote it and his immediate supervisor. So you're not really getting a fair trial because the person who wrote the ticket is still in control of whether or not they're going to consider, you know, changing it. And
In many cases,
you know, it's pretty hard to get a cop to admit he made a mistake. You know, so I don't know. I've never tried it. I don't know what the success rate is. Be an interesting statistic to look at. But if it's bad enough, I guess it's worth the trouble. But if it's for a light,
well,
and you're not driving anyway. So
yeah, it's something I do for my clients. Is I look through a motor carrier's cab report. It's a summation of all their CSA alerts or CSA scores and their inspections and relative violations.
right.
And there are times, I would say the majority of times when either I file the data queue or the motor carrier, you know, I can do it on their behalf or they do it, you know,
Right.
to get them started, to get them used to how to doing this, they've got to kind of speak the DOT's officer's language. So every T crossed, every I dotted, it's got to be perfect. And if you're going to submit it, make sure you hit the nail on the head. But my success rate is probably about 50%.
Really?
But I've got experience doing it, and I know how to speak to them. I know what they're looking for, and you know, and you got to have your ducks in a row. You got to have your evidence, and sometimes you can't always come by that. And sometimes you can just be wrong. But the biggest one I see is probably out of about half of those that are successful, half of those are things that are duplicates. So they may give you a violation for, let me think, what's a good example?
Well, I can give you one. The parking light's out, but it's also the turn signal. It's also the four-way. So they give you 3 fines for the same bulb, or 3
Right.
warnings for three violations for the same bulb. That's called stacking.
Yeah.
Yes, they're essentially, they're stacking them. So I would say that the success rate on data queuing those is higher.
Probably
because,
is. Yeah.
we know what to look for. Pattern.
All righty.
Is there anything else, or is there any questions? I'm kind of going back and looking through our topics and stuff.
I see a couple of new comments, but you've answered those earlier in the podcast, so people can go back and watch. I don't really see anything that was insurance related that we haven't answered. I guess I'll hit this one real quick. Luke asked, "Can you go more in depth to the Landstar warranty?" It's basic. It's an acronym, NPT.
It's not Landstar warranties. It's a commercial warranty that Landstar just basically endorses. It's called NTP.
NTP, and so they deduct it from your settlement every week, and then if it's good,
You can
it's good.
you
If
can
it's not,
Google
it's not.
NTP and that's what they'll. But it's not Landstar connected. Landstar just allows you to use your weekly settlement to pay for it. So
Yeah. I mean, we don't have any personal experience with it. Now, I have a client that's about to use it, so in a couple 3 weeks, I'll be able to tell you, I guess, based on his experience. And I've seen people, anecdotally, people say that it paid for big ticket repairs and stuff like that. But don't miss the big picture on a warranty. Okay, a warranty is not going to pay your downtime. A warranty could potentially take longer than if you would have just paid for it in the first place, because warranties are going to fight to get that cost down as much as they can. They're going to lengthen the process. So just because it's a warranty does not mean it's beneficial to you. So you got to make sure you don't look at this as some kind of magic pill that will replace a good savings plan where you can take it to anywhere you want to take it. Like somebody like Carl that could probably 100% fix it versus somebody that 50% fixes it and then you're broke down again 3 weeks later. So it's just not a 100% deal. And so we don't do warranties, but
I personally think they're worthless, but for the very reason that the repairs are not what's expensive. It's a loss of revenue. And in fact that you failed your customer, you're going to pretty much fail a customer for sure, because you have no control over the amount of time that they keep you there working on the vehicle. I maintain you can take your vehicle in there in warranty. I can take mine in there as cash, and I'll beat you out of there every time. So that's my contention: is how much. Well, what's a week worth to you? Okay,
and let me reiterate. When I had a client that went down with a clutch on a Monday morning at 5 a.m., it turned out to be a clutch. Truck wouldn't go in gear. Towed him into the Freightliner dealership. They told him, I saw the work order. Part unavailable, unknown ETA. They told him 2 or 3 weeks. All right. I made 3 phone calls. The first guy didn't answer. The second guy said he was too busy, told me to call the third guy. The third guy was a mobile mechanic. That mobile mechanic went to that dealership, bought that clutch off of their shelf, towed my guy down the road to a rented space in another shop. He was hauling freight Friday. Truck broke down Monday morning, was hauling freight Friday. Now, I don't know what happens if he says, well, hey, I've got a warranty. And the Freightliner dealer says, oh, we can't get the part that's on their shelf. That's on their shelf. I don't know why they lied to him and told him it wasn't available. Okay. But what happens if he sits there 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks waiting on a clutch that was there in the building? So again, guys, you're in business. You got to be willing to fight. You got to be willing to make phone calls and tow the damn thing out of the Freightliner dealer if you have
And
to.
oh, by the way, the repair bill was $3,000 less than the original.
$3,000.
Yeah,
$3,000 less. So
now you can keep your warranties.
yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're good. So everybody go see Brian at com-ins.com. And we appreciate you being here. Follow him on what's your TikTok handle?
I don't know.
Uh-oh. Oh my gosh. Doesn't even know his own TikTok handle. I think it's CIANTP or NTPCIA or something.
There might be an underscore in there. Yeah, at CIA_NTP.
And there you have it.
And look, I kind of want to tell, I mean, since we're on here, and who knows how many views this thing might get over time. Guys, a lot of people just think that insurance companies are a scam. They're just ripping me off. I'm a broker. Look, I don't pay claims. The insurance company pays the claims. I'm the mediator. But I have sat on both sides of the fence. And I can tell you, to anybody who thinks that insurance companies are scam artists, they are in business to make money. And in 2012, they lost 2.5%. In 2013, they lost 2.4%. This is a third party. This is AM Best. They do all the ratings for all the insurance companies. This is not insurance company data. Mm-hmm. This is an analysis. Now, 2009 and 2010, they made 9%. 2011, they made 3%. They haven't made money since 2011. They make money on their investments. So losing 2.5%, they lost 5% in 2015, 8% in 2016, 8% in 2017, 6% in 2018. I don't have the numbers for the last 3 years, but they're probably upside down. So I think it just comes to public awareness and public education. It really does. There's it feels like you're paying $20,000, $30,000 a year to have a truck insured. It feels like a ripoff. But I can tell you, look at that truck and tell me what a fender and a bumper and a radiator costs. And if you hit a Mercedes and you hurt somebody, think about what that costs. Yeah. So trucks are out there crashing every day, all the time. And it's I mean, it may feel like a scam, but so does the DOT sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, we're all about minimizing risk here. And there's no question that having the right kind of insurance and the right amount is part of that risk management strategy. I mean, in some cases it's a requirement anyway, but beyond that, it's just part of your risk management business strategy. So it's people get upset because they pay for it and they don't get anything back. Of course, the life insurance industry made a fortune off that by selling cash value life insurance. But it's a business expense. It's necessary to protect the what if. It doesn't matter how good your business is if you can't last. And getting involved with one of these situations where you're at risk for liability. How do you survive that? How do you get past that? Especially with your own authority, because the lawyers are going to go for whoever's got the deepest pockets. When you lease to Landstar, it's probably going to be them. If it's yours, the authority, guess who else are they going to go to?
It's going to be you, and guess who has to pay that bill? The insurance company does.
Insurance company, right? So
they pay these, $500,000. They pay these really big awards, and they're also paying for damages to the truck and damages to the cargo. The rate that you receive, and here's how different it can be. An owner-operator who has decided after 2 years of experience to get his own authority, for that $1 million liability that most brokers require, I know FMCSA only requires $750,000, but everybody gets $1 million, for a $50,000 truck and for a $100,000 cargo limit and general liability, they might pay $8,000 a year, or they might the best quote out there might be $30,000 a year.
All right.
So it depends on what you qualify for, what your what your insurance score looks like, which I get that off the last 4 digits of your social and your date of birth. So it's probably some sort of credit score, right?
Right.
And the type of equipment that you have and what you're going to be hauling and stuff like that. So they develop those underwriting technologies to, they get it from actuarial data from claims histories. So the insurance companies are huge data companies. They're always collecting data and analyzing it. And of course, they're trying to make a profit because that's what all businesses do. But if you look at their direct combined ratios, the trucking has been, poorly performing, and that's why insurance rates are up so high.
Right. Well, and I'm sure that there's probably limited numbers of people that are willing to write a period, because of what you said with the percentages over that, so.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. But the market changes every day, and you've got insurtech companies coming in, and it's bringing rates down a good bit. And so sometimes I'll get on YouTube and do a little State of the Union address about insurance. I get about 80 or 90 views, and that's about it. So,
well, Brian, thanks
anyway,
again for being on, and we appreciate it. And maybe we'll touch base again and see what happens with the with the viewership and what kind of comments come up. And so we wish you all the best. Hopefully we can get you a little business out of this anyway. So.
Well, that's cool. And same to you guys. Thanks for having me on. I love what you guys are doing. You guys have a great business model. It's obviously working, and keep showing the haters. I'd be glad to come back on sometime though. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Man,
Thank you for being here. Yeah. All right.
Well, in an effort to minimize risk, my family hired a trainer, and we have to go to the gym 3 times a week, and I've got to be up at 5:30. So I'm gonna shut this show down and go to bed because my body is already screaming for mercy after going 2 days, because we've got this professional bodybuilder. I mean, this guy's a monster, and he's trying to kill us all. So we will be back with you next Sunday night at 2100, and then we should be having an orientation at the end of the month, so you may get to see another episode from the Lunatic Lounge. So be looking forward to that. Check out the website, blueribbonlogistics.com. Please check out our sponsors, Pittsburgh Power. And I'll put the banner back up. There it is. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we will see y'all next week.
Good night, everybody.